I never imagined I would stand at a point where desire and morality would fight inside me like fire and water. My married life had become predictable, almost silent. We woke up, exchanged routine words, moved through responsibilities, and went to bed like two humans sharing a roof instead of two souls sharing a life. Nothing was wrong on the surface, yet something essential had drained out slowly over the years: tenderness, excitement, the feeling of being seen. I didn't crave luxury, I craved warmth. I didn't want another man. I wanted to feel wanted again. It began quietly, without warning, like a soft breeze before a storm. He wasn't someone I sought, he simply appeared. A familiar face in my everyday routine who somehow started noticing the invisible things about me. The tiredness in my voice. The way I tried to smile even when it felt heavy. He asked how I was, and unlike others, he waited for the real answer. Felt harmless at first. A conversation, a compliment, a shared laugh. But that tiny attention, so gentle yet so rare, lit an ache inside me I thought was long dead. My partner at home was present physically but distant emotionally. Always tired, always occupied, always elsewhere in thought. We slept on the same bed with miles between us. I don't blame him entirely. Life changed both of us. But the silence between us had grown roots. Days passed where eye contact meant nothing more than acknowledging a chore done or forgotten. I kept telling myself we were fine, that this was normal, that love just settles. But deep inside, I felt like a plant stored in a dark room, alive yet no longer growing. The more unnoticed I felt at home, the more I found myself waiting for attention that wasn't supposed to matter. A message from him could lift my entire day. One sentence could make me feel seen again. I began putting effort into my appearance, pretending it was for myself, but I knew the truth my heart whispered every morning. His presence was becoming a place where I could breathe. And that terrified me because I knew what such feelings could turn into if left unchecked. I didn't want to fall into temptation. No married person does at the start. But desire rarely arrives with warning signs. It grows quietly, like a shadow lengthening with each sunset. I kept telling myself I was in control, that I was strong enough to stop whenever I wanted. Yet every new conversation made me feel something my marriage no longer offered: excitement, youth, spark. I tried to ignore the shift happening inside me, but ignoring is not the same as resisting. The truth is, I was already slipping long before I admitted it. I crossed no physical line, yet my heart was no longer where it was supposed to be. I felt alive again in a way that scared me and thrilled me at the same time. And somewhere deep within, I knew that if this continued, desire might one day ask me to choose, and I feared what choice I might make. What began as harmless conversation slowly shaped itself into a routine I depended on. His presence became the first thought in the morning, long before I checked if my husband was still asleep beside me. I found myself waiting for messages the way lovers wait at railway platforms, nervous, eager, ashamed of their own hope. A simple good morning from him held more warmth than a full day with the person I had vowed to love. I didn't say it out loud, but my heart already knew I was drifting somewhere I shouldn't. Our interactions grew naturally but dangerously. Coffee breaks stretched into shared lunches. I told myself they were coincidences, but coincidences don't happen every day. We talked about work, life, dreams we had forgotten we once held. He listened like every word mattered, like my existence carried color. When he remembered little details, my favorite tea, the music I played when stressed, it shook me more than any grand gesture could. Attention is a subtle form of seduction, and I was already captured by it. Home, I noticed myself withdrawing. I spoke less, smiled less, yet pretended more. My husband asked if I was tired and I nodded, though exhaustion was not what weighed me, it was guilt. A guilt that felt like a thin blanket. Present, but never enough to cover what was happening inside me. I knew emotional betrayal may hurt more than physical infidelity ever could, and still I kept walking deeper into it. There was a night I will never forget. Work ran late, rain tapping rhythmically outside, and he offered me a ride home. I could have refused. I should have refused. But I didn't. Inside the quiet car, conversation felt intimate without touching. Our voices lowered, breaths synchronized, as if the silence between words held more meaning than speech. My heart raced with confusion. I was a married woman, yet sitting next to him felt like stepping into a world where I was desired, valued, chosen. At a moment came when his hand brushed mine while reaching for something. Not intentional, but neither of us moved away immediately. My skin tingled with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. 1 second became two, two became three, then suddenly we both pulled apart, but the damage was already done. That brief touch was enough to break whatever boundary I thought was intact. I knew then that temptation was not around the corner. It was already here, seated beside me, breathing softly, waiting for me to surrender completely. That night, for the first time, I lied to my husband. I came home late and said traffic delayed me. The words left my mouth smoother than they should have. A lie that opened the door to more lies, because once a heart begins hiding, it rarely stops at one secret. I lay in bed thinking of two men, the one I promised my life to, and the one who made me feel alive. My conscience whispered warnings, but desire whispered louder that I told myself I was still safe, that no true line had been crossed yet. But deep inside, I knew I had already crossed it in ways no one could see, and the next step would only require one weak moment. And weakness, sooner or later, arrives. Weakness did not arrive like thunder, loud and impossible to ignore. It came softly, disguised as comfort, patience, and understanding. I kept telling myself I was strong enough to stop whenever I wished, but strength without action is nothing more than a fantasy. And fantasies, when nurtured, eventually demand to become real. Our conversations moved from casual to intimate in ways that had nothing to do with the body and everything to do with the heart. He told me things he had never shared with anyone. About loneliness, about fear of growing old alone, about wishing life could give him someone who understood him without explanation. I knew I should have stopped him, drawn a line, stepped back, but instead I let his vulnerability intertwine with mine. Two lonely souls create dangerous warmth. The night everything changed was not planned. Temptation rarely sends invitations. We went out after work, just a simple dinner. Yet both of us knew it meant more than food. There was anticipation in the air. Unspoken, heavy, undeniable. Sitting across from him, seeing the way he looked at me as if I were something precious, something missing from his life, something worth longing for. That gaze stripped away every piece of resistance I had left, and I laughed more than I had laughed in months. I found myself leaning closer when he spoke, memorizing the smallest expressions on his face. When he walked me to my car, the silence between us said everything words could not. I should have left. I should have ended it right there. Instead, I stood still, waiting, or maybe hoping, for a moment that would change everything. He reached for my hand first, gentle, uncertain, as if asking silently for permission. I didn't pull away. I let his fingers wrap around mine, warm and steady, and in that instant, my marriage felt like a distant memory rather than a present reality. A simple touch, yet it felt like a vow in reverse, a decision to betray rather than commit. When he stepped closer, our breaths mingled, and my heart beat faster than it ever had in my husband's presence. I knew I was crossing a line I could never uncross. The first kiss was hesitant, careful, filled with fear and desire tangled together. Not rushed, not wild, just deeply wrong and overwhelmingly needed. I felt alive, cherished, chosen. And that feeling became stronger than any promise I had ever made at the altar. That I wish I could say I pulled away, that I remembered the weight of my vows, but desire won. One moment became another, and instead of stopping, we both surrendered to everything we had tried to resist for weeks. It wasn't just the physical connection. It was the emotional explosion behind it. Years of loneliness escaping in one reckless decision. We didn't speak afterward for a while, just breathed in the reality we had created, knowing that nothing could return to what it was before. When I finally drove home that night, my reflection looked different. My lips carried someone else's memory, my heart carried guilt heavy enough to crush bone. And still, beneath all the shame, a part of me felt unwilling to regret it. I had betrayed my marriage, yes, but I had also rediscovered a part of myself I thought had died long ago. I entered my home quietly, past the man who trusted me, past the life I once protected. A single choice had rewritten everything. And while I pretended to sleep that night, I realized the most painful truth. I did not know whether I wanted to stop or fall further. The morning after that conversation, I moved through the house with an unsettled calm, the kind that comes after crossing a quiet boundary you didn't intend to cross but can't take back. Nothing had technically happened, yet the air around me felt different, charged with awareness I hadn't felt in years. I kept replaying his words, the way he looked at me, the gentleness in his voice when he admitted he cared more than he should. It wasn't something I could dismiss. It lingered like a soft echo under every thought. My husband returned late the night before, too tired to notice anything unusual. Or maybe he simply wasn't looking. I watched him move around me with the same distracted routine, and for the first time the absence of his attention felt louder than ever. I wanted to tell myself that what I felt for Daniel, whatever it was, came from loneliness, not from him. But deep down I knew that wasn't the full truth. It wasn't just that Daniel noticed me. It was that I noticed him back. A few days passed before I saw him again. I wasn't expecting him, but when the doorbell rang and I opened it to find him standing there, rain dusted across his jacket, something inside me tightened. He said he came to return a book my husband had lent him, but the way his eyes searched mine told me that wasn't the only reason. I stepped aside and let him in, unsure whether it was the right thing to do, but unable to stop myself. He looked around the house as if testing the distance between us. I offered him a place to sit. He hesitated before accepting, as though sitting too close might say something he wasn't ready to say. I sat across from him, but even that felt too close for the amount of unspoken truth between us. He asked how I'd been, voice low and careful. I told him I'd been thinking, and he nodded as if he already knew. He said he hadn't been able to stop thinking either. There was no hesitation, no attempt to hide it. He said he felt guilty for putting me in a difficult position, yet he couldn't pretend nothing had shifted between us. His honesty disarmed me. I told him I didn't blame him. I told him the shift didn't come from him alone. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy with everything we weren't saying. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, fingers intertwined tightly, as if holding himself back. He admitted that he had cared for me quietly for years, long before he ever let himself acknowledge it. He said it wasn't intentional. It was something that grew in the spaces my husband never filled. Hearing that should have frightened me. Instead, it felt like someone had finally spoken a truth I had sensed but never dared to name. I told him he didn't imagine the distance in my marriage. I said it plainly without trying to soften it. The words felt like stepping across an invisible line. He looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen before, hope mixed with restraint. He didn't move toward me. He didn't reach out. But he didn't hide the longing either. When I placed my hand on the edge of the table, his eyes followed the movement before meeting mine again. Slowly, carefully, he placed his hand close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from it but not touching me. It was a question without words. That I didn't pull away, that I didn't close the gap either. But by allowing our hands to hover just close enough to tremble from the tension, I gave him an answer neither of us admitted aloud. And then my phone rang. My husband's name lit up the screen. The sound cut through the moment like a blade, reminding me exactly what line I was standing on. I answered with a steadiness that didn't match the chaos inside me. When the call ended, I set the phone down slowly. Unable to look at Daniel, he stood up first, clearing his throat softly. He apologized, not for what he felt but for complicating my life. I told him he hadn't forced anything. The truth was already there. He nodded, eyes darker with understanding, and said he would give me space. When he left, he didn't look back. But the moment he walked out, I realized space wouldn't be enough to undo what had just happened. Nothing could.